a long downhill drop after that, and then you come up a little hill and into the Ascari chicane, which you see him entering now. It's a left, right, and then left again, out onto the back straight behind the pits here, and it's a long drive all the way down there to the Parabolica. Again, very high speed when you enter that corner.
Daylight today, of course, the heat haze shimmering. I guess when you come out of Ascari, you can barely even see where the Parabolica is, but that won't put the drivers off at all. Conditions very good indeed. It was wet in the official test days at the beginning of this month. In fact, it was wet as late as yesterday afternoon. Both of Friday's sessions for all the cars were held in rain conditions. Nobody got a chance to even think about dry tyres. So this is the first dry day of running at Monza, and Tim Sugden 1:56.580. Now Sugden was quicker in the 45-minute qualifying session than Gousselard, but Gousselard is quickest at the moment, 1:56.034. Compare that there to Tim Sugden's time on the screen. And here comes our third shot. This is Michel Neugarten. Now Neugarten, again, a vastly experienced Porsche racer, and he is racing with the Perspective Racing team. Thierry Perrier, the Frenchman, is his colleague. And Neugarten, well, he's been racing in Europe, in the USA, in the American Le Mans Series over the last few years, and coming back to the FIA GT Series. A little bit hefty perhaps over the curves there. The first of the Variantes here, the Variante Goodyear as it used to be called, is now very much reprofiled from being an almost double chicane where you went right left and then right left again before coming onto the straight. It is now just a single longer, more sweeping chicane. I think eventually they gave up trying to get Formula One drivers not to cut it, David.
I think what happened was that every time the Formula One people came here to Monza, they always had an accident in the first corner. So rather than try and get the driver to do what he should do, they decided to alter the circuit instead. I have to think that that was the easy way out, I must admit, because I did like that chicane layout as it used to be, but now it's gone to a much more conventional right and left and then straight into the Curva Grande afterwards.
Well, Neugarten picking up the dust there on the exit of the second of the Lesmos. As you said, David, it is tighter that second corner than it looks and than the first one has been, but then he was pretty ragged as well out of the second of the Variantes. Under the banking, the old banking of the oval track at Monza is why they dip down and then come up the rise as they come here into Ascari. And Ascari, another corner, deceptively slower on the first element than it is on the second. You've got to get your speed down and controlled for the first element, otherwise you won't be able to fire it out onto this back stretch, which is 3/4 of the distance of the front straight. So again, very, very important. And like all the other cars here, Neugarten very, very aggressive and very twitchy as a result. There's very little grip. You can see how flat the rear wing looks. Not standing up in the air, it's just barely there to trim the car, because of course everybody running minimum drag here for straight line speed. Well, Neugarten ragged as anything, but fastest of the lot so far. First man into the 55s, 1:55.992, and that's a pretty impressive shot, I would think, by Michel Neugarten. The fastest of the cars did a 1:53 in qualifying, so still some time to find, perhaps. Fabio Babini starts his timed run, and for an Italian on his home track of Monza, well, what better place to display his talents to the home crowd. And we'll be hoping now that Saturday is turning into such a scorchio day here in the heart of Lombardia that the local residents will be coming out in force, with the Alps behind us and the beautiful national park of Monza all around this racetrack. It is really buried deep in the middle of almost a national forest, the park of Monza. Very unusual venue for a racetrack of any kind. And there are plenty of other distractions here for the residents of Monza and nearby Milan, but let's hope that a chance to come and see some of the world's best sports car drivers in action will tempt a few of them away from the sunny terrazzas during the course of Sunday. Well, Fabio Babini, this car, what did he manage in qualifying terms? 1:54.7, and I don't suppose that anybody's going to get quite into the 54s or 53s, David, because as the track has heated up, as the air temperatures have come up since this morning's qualifying session, it looks as though the track is getting slower.
The track is probably a little bit slow because of the heat of the day. As the day goes along, it always gets a little bit slower. With the heat, the engines breathe that little bit worse. racing cars do like running first thing in the morning, but here we see not only the problems with the track, but also with the people going out on brand new, unused and cold tyres, and they've only got that one lap to warm them up. And we can see a lot of people struggling. We've seen the last car that came around the Parabolica there that really just right on the ragged edge and lost a bit of time because it was slipping, sliding around, and these guys just haven't got enough heat after one lap in their tyres to get the absolute maximum out of them, and therefore they're all about a second a lap down where they should be.
A little bit of inexperience, I think, there, because Babini came into the pits as he finished his flying lap. Now 1:56.062 is his time. We're just seeing that the next car, which is Luca Riccitelli, coming across the line. But I was surprised that Babini was taking such a tight line as he came out.
No, that wasn't Babini. It was a car that had been in front. It was Norgarten coming into the pits after his slowing down lap. Babini made it across the line, but unfortunately he's now second slowest out of the 4 cars that we've seen so far. He obviously was a little bit more reluctant to push very hard on cold tyres, and therefore he slipped down the field from where he was from the first qualifying this morning.
I'm getting my cars confused then, but Luca Riccitelli, no confusing the Red Bull cars, and a pair of them in this year's championship, identically liveried. And my goodness, they've been having trouble with keeping drivers in one piece. Luca Riccitelli returning after a practice injury earlier in the season, and he is well, their most consistent performer in the team, in the RWS Motorsport team, with Dieter Quester, the Austrian, drafted in alongside, and the other car, the other RWS car, Fabio Mancini and Gianni Collini, an Italian pair of drivers.
This car, you can see when it's going around now through the corners, it's moving around a lot. Even on the straight, you can see the cars bouncing up and down much more than the previous cars we watched. And all these cars are basically the same cars in this particular category. So we can only assume that this particular team have decided to make their suspension so much softer, whether that be altering the shock absorbers or the springs, I'm not sure. But certainly this car is moving around on the road much, much better. Whether this will help them on the one-lap qualifying or not, I'm not 100% sure. You can see just coming into the Parabolica there, locking up the right-hand front wheel with the smoke coming off it. And he's pushing hard, and he's using all the road on the way out, which is what you need to do to get the best possible exit of that corner up to the start and finish.
Not looking as ragged as Michel Neugarten did on his lap, but again, Neugarten was using all the road, bit of the gravel, and locking up his unladen wheel as he came into the Parabolica. Riccitelli goes fastest of all now, 1:54.261. Neugarten 1:55.992, and Gousselard, who's third fastest, 1:56.034. So there's a fair difference, 1.7 seconds between the fastest and the second quickest, but this will decide effectively just their positions in the class, because conditions, I think, being as fair as they are, it's unlikely but not impossible that the GT cars will go slower than the NGT machines. Final car then from the NGT group is Jürgen von Gartzen, and another of the experienced Porsche drivers in the field. Von Gartzen has probably driven more Porsches than even I've had hot dinners. He's been around so long, and a very, very experienced driver. Incidentally, if you do get close-up views of the sides of the cars during this weekend, you will notice that every single number panel on the doors bears a little black corner and the message in tribute to Bob Wallach, and a number of the cars have got in memoriam and tribute stickers and sign writing on them as well, because Bob's loss in the Sebring 12 Hours earlier in the month, I think, as keenly felt in Europe as in anywhere, and particularly among the drivers in this championship, and particularly, I think, among the drivers in this class as well. The NGT cars, largely Porsche racers for a lot of their career, many of the drivers here, and of course Bob very much a leading light in the Porsche family. Well, Riccitelli's car is well out of the way as we come hurtling towards the Parabolica. Very sharp turn in from von Gartzen.
But again, on the exit, you can see him using all of that road right to the white line at the very edge, trying to get the oomph out of the corner to get it down that straight towards the start and finish. But the times are certainly picking up, and he's picked up considerably more.
Yes, he certainly has. 1.2 seconds quicker than Riccatelli even. 1:52.987. I wonder if David's doing exactly what I'm doing, which is looking at what the GT times were. Well, the sixth quickest GT car, which is on screen at the moment, managed a 1:49.4 in qualifying, compared to von Gartzen's 1:52.00. Von Gartzen has gone 0.9 of a second slower, so it's unlikely perhaps that any of the GT cars will fall in amongst the NGTs, but we'll wait and see. Into the GT field now in the 12-car Superpole shootouts. Just to remind you, this new facet of the FIA GT and Eurosport Super Racing weekends will allow the GT and NGT competitors to duke it out head-to-head, essentially for the top 12 positions on the grid. We ride now in the Belmondo Viper of Didier Deforny, the number 11 car, one of the trio of Belmondo Vipers, identically liveried for keen fans among you, the 11 car with the yellow door mirrors. That's how you're going to be able to tell these cars, and only how. One car has dark blue, one car has pale blue, and one car has yellow door mirrors, completely in accordance with their identical colour schemes, and there is absolutely no other way of telling them apart. Even on pace, generally speaking, they're a very evenly matched group of 6 drivers, and the cars superbly prepared and have always shown great pace.
You can see a fantastic view just there from inside the car, and you can see how low it is when they're sitting inside that car going around the circuit. From the camera view now, it looks awfully simple when you're looking at it down from on high, and yet sitting inside the car, all of a sudden these corners come up so much quicker and look so much sharper when you're sitting inside one of these very, very quick cars doing something like 250 kilometers along some of these straights. You can see him dipping down there, down to the dip onto the bridge, coming up towards the Ascari chicane, and first over the curb to the left, and then a little bit of curb to the right, and a big bit of curb to the left, and then there's a massive curb on the outside with a piece of road immediately after it, which you can use all of on the way out. Again, what we said earlier was you've got to get out of these corners very quickly, because you've got such long straights after them before you have to brake again. So a lot of time can be made up there by getting out very, very quickly out of the corners. Into the last corner now, the Parabolica. Nice tight line as he goes in. And he doesn't look as though he's using quite as much of the road on the way out. No, he isn't. He certainly could have pushed a little bit harder there on the exit in order to get the better time.
Again, perhaps just bearing in mind that he'll have to use these tyres to do the first stint of Sunday's race. Didier Deforny strikes the first Superpole blow for the GT cars. He goes quicker than all the NGT cars, so he at least will start ahead of them. At the moment, he's on pole position. 5 cars yet to launch their assault. His time, 1:50.504, and that is within hundreds of what they managed in normal practice. They did a 1:49.432, so 9/10 of a second slower. Now again, a very different view, but the same viewpoint from inside the number 5 Raffinelli Ferrari, the 550 Maranello, the V12 front-engine Ferrari road supercar. We saw these cars run by Lamberto Leone's first racing outfit last year, doing teapot imitations on almost every track. They really could not get the car sorted. Gabriele Raffinelli's team seems to have built on that, and their cars have been going A, very quickly, and B, so far, very reliably as well, David.
Yes, they are. They are very well built cars. You can see from looking inside there, everything's in position, everything looks as though it should be. The gear lever has got a sequential change gearbox. You can see him pulling and pushing it. It doesn't move it from side to side, it simply goes backwards and forwards. It works very much like a motorcycle gearbox. So that helps them a little bit with the driver not getting too tired, but you can see him pushing as hard as he can coming out to that last corner, the second Lesmo. So much so he's all over the curb and over the edge of the gravel as well. Now coming down underneath the bridge up towards the Ascari chicane.
Well, 2 Italians in this car, Emanuele Naspetti and Mimo Schiattarella, neither of whom I'm sure will need much of an introduction to Eurosport audiences. And Mimo, back from racing the Lola Judd in the American Le Mans Series last year, and I spoke to him yesterday afternoon about driving this Ferrari for the first time, and he said he's only driven it so far. Yesterday afternoon he did about 10 laps in the rain, allowed Emanuele, who's done some testing with it, to try and set the car up, but he said it was very strange. A roof over his head as Naspetti loses it, and there is the danger in pushing just a fraction too hard. An Italian in a Ferrari at Monza. Well, it was almost the cliched inevitability, but Naspetti pushing very hard indeed, saves the car from too much damage, but those tyres, David,
they're certainly going to take a lot of pounding here. You can see the cars get a little bit out of sync. He caught it, then he couldn't catch it again. It was onto the gravel, onto the grass. Round it goes. Now at that point you can see it being locked up because he's tried to stop it, and now he's come back off the brakes a little bit. The front's locked up again. So yes, there's going to be some big flat spots on those tyres. Now when he comes to start this race, they're going to be there. They're going to be there for the whole time they're on there. So you can either take the whole 1 hour he's going to start the race and have that problem, or maybe he might decide to pop into the pits after 1 minute or one lap and fit a new set and simply take that penalty and get on with his job in hand. We'll have to wait and see.
We will indeed. This is the third of our GT runners then, Boris de Richebourg, who had 2 gearboxes fail under him yesterday in this Belmondo Viper and was crunching his way around in qualifying today with a gearbox that he said was frankly quite horrible. Well, let's see what the Belmondo team have managed to do. The other 2 cars, 10 and 11, incidentally, no problems whatsoever in the gear change department. It seems to move exclusively a little gremlin in the 12 car. Well, as for the Ferrari, only 4th fastest at the moment, Emanuele Naspetti, 1:55.001, showing plenty of potential, that car, but Naspetti just pushing a fraction too hard, perhaps.
It's one of those things that happens. You've got to make your mind up when you go out there with these cold tyres. You've got 1 lap to warm them up. And you can make your mind up. Either you push very, very hard and go for that time and try and make your position slightly better than it was when you started the day off. I mean, Naspetti started off 5th overall, and he was going to try and make that a little bit better. And unfortunately, it didn't work for him, and now he's dropped behind even 2 of the slower GT cars.
He will still start ahead of the rest of the GT field, though, and all of the other NGT cars guaranteed a position in the top 12 by virtue of the laws of Superpole. Now again, a much neater looking approach here from the 12 car, but much further away from the curbs, certainly than Naspetti was. Was Naspetti, do you think, carrying a fraction too much speed in, or was he getting onto the power a little early? It seemed hard to tell the difference. He was just running out of road, which kind of indicates to me that he might just have been going in a fraction quickly.
He was going in a fraction quickly, and he was certainly very quickly back onto the throttle, but it didn't work for him. One of those things.
De Richebourg now quickest at the moment. The third Belmondo Viper of Anthony Kumpen, the Belgian, the number 10 car. This is the car with the dark blue mirrors. For those of you who want to try and identify them in close quarters combat, good luck. Don't rely on me to be able to do it. Now this is the 3rd fastest car in qualifying. So during normal qualifying rules, this car would have started on the inside of the front row, but he knows that as he goes out to do this Superpole lap, he has just 2 cars following, and he's already seen, and I'm sure he will have seen, because he wasn't on track at the time, he'll have been either watching the monitors or the big screen somewhere, I'm sure, as he was sitting in the car. Emanuele Naspetti dropping the Ferrari off the circuit, fortunately without major damage to anything other than the rubber, certainly. And their graphic illustration of the perils of Superpole. But for Anthony Kumpen, using some of the curbing, but not a great deal. And I think this is going to be, like his predecessor, Boris de Richebourg, a slightly more conservative lap, certainly than a couple of the NGT laps and than the Naspetti lap in the Ferrari.
Looking at the way he's come out of some of those corners, he hasn't used all of the circuit by any stretch of imagination. So I don't think he's going to do as well as he did on the practice this morning. He's going to drop down 1 or 2 places, I reckon.
Well, we were talking earlier about what you can and can't do to your cars in terms of adjusting them for practice, and for this Superpole particularly. In the British Touring Car Championship, they used to do all sorts of things. The only thing you practically didn't do was tyre warmers, David. You had all sorts of camber changes and setup changes to try and almost boil the tyres alive in the first lap to get them running for the Superpole. But here you can see they've blanked off the radiators to a degree to try and decrease the drag, because it's not going to overheat in a single flying lap. As Kumpen, as you predicted, comes up just behind Boris de Richebourg, so fairly conservative, but not that slow. Now, he is second quickest at the moment, Boris de Richebourg fastest, and we have had 10 cars out of the pits. And this, the 11th car you're looking at on screen now, Christophe Bouchou, very noticeably weaving heavily to really try and put some heat under that enormous 8-litre V10 on the front tyres. And we're hearing from the pits that this will be the last of the Superpole drivers, because Julian Bailey, who was due to bring out the number 2 Lister Storm, it seems has not appeared from the garage. Now, we will try and find out why. We've got our camera crew down there beavering away. Now, whether this is a problem where the car won't start or a tactical choice by Lawrence Pierce, I can't tell you off the top of my head what happens if you don't go out and do your Superpole shot. I guess you just start 12th.
I'm not sure what will happen there. I think the rules as I read them, certainly if you're qualified in the top 12 for the Superpole, then you will start in the top 12. So on that basis, if he doesn't run, then I'm sure I read in the rules that he will have to start in 12th place. The little clip we've seen just before this car of the Lister, which was in the garage, did have someone underneath it with a light, so I reckon that it's more of a problem with the car rather than a tactical thing with Lawrence Pierce, the owner of the Lister car team.
The only slight question I have as to whether Lawrence might have tried something slightly off the back, off the wall, is that Jamie Campbell-Walter at the moment was 7th fastest in the GT class, and so will start behind this top dozen. And it's conceivable, although my tactical mind isn't that great, I have to say, that Lawrence might have chosen to start the 2 Lister Storms right together. I don't know particularly why you would want to do that, but
I can't think of a reason to do that, other than the fact it looks very nice for some pictures. But they're here to win a motor race. They're not here to get some nice pictures at the start of a race. It's very nice to have some nice pictures at the end of a race where the 2 cars are together. But what we can see on the screen now is one car that's just trying very hard, and this one's looking as though it's using much more. So Christophe Bouchou, we've seen doing a lot of weaving before, so that will definitely put a lot of heat in the tyres, and he's pushing so hard with this car. You can see him now using much more of the circuit. There he goes right round to the edge of the parabolica as he's exiting. I'd expect him to go to the top here.
Well, certainly on his previous times he should be right up there, and Bouchou, as demanded, goes into the 148.287, the fastest by a clear second and 800ths from Boris de Richebourg, second for the Belmondo Viper team as the Labra Viper team take pole position. And on row 2 of the grid will be 2 further Belmondo Vipers, Anthony Kumpen third, and Didier Defourny's car, 10 and 11 respectively from the Belmondo team, will be third and fourth on the grid. So with de Richebourg, Kumpen and Defourny, Christophe Bouchou is going to be heavily outnumbered on the run down to the first chicane, and whichever mirror he looks in, it will be yellow, and predominantly so. If he's not careful, there'll be yellow outside the side door windows as well. Now we're down in the pits with Julian Bailey. We'll try and get a word with him in just a second. I can see the camera crew in the door of a half-shut Lister doorway, and just waiting to see a black uniform as well as Christophe Bouchou rolls back to the pits with his first FIA GT class pole. Bouchou, of course, a Mercedes driver before this, but never a pole sitter in the FIA GT series.
Hello, Julian. Can you tell us, please, why you won't be driving in the Superpole?
Basically, we had a mechanical problem that we found out about an hour ago, and it's going to be too risky to take the car out.
So you'll be lining up one place behind your teammate, one place in front of your teammate tomorrow on the grid.
Well, I didn't really hear the question, but I think, as I say, I start 12th now on the grid, and Jamie's 13th at the moment, so it's not been good for Lister, but we'll just have to get on with it.
OK, thank you very much, Julian.
So there's the answer. Mechanical problems with the Lister Storm, preventing them from having their shot at pole position. As a result, not just dropping to second or third on the grid, but all the way down to 12th place. And that is a bad start to the season for Lawrence Pierce's pair of Lister Storms, 12th and 13th on the grid. And the car you saw going out in the background, incidentally, was the number 1 car of Jamie Campbell-Walter, who will start 13th. There's a final 15 minutes of qualifying now. He can't improve his position, but he must defend it in case anybody else in the GT class goes quicker and he's pushed further down still. So there are the positions in the first Super Pole of the season here at Monza. And what a place to start. Plenty of movement in the cars, and with the low downforce and drivers pushing hard, plenty of drama even on a single car one lap stint. And as you'll see in just a moment when you stay with us for the opening race of the Super Renault Formula Renault 2000 series, this is going to be a great track for racing on as well. Nervous cars, nervous drivers, first race of the season, low downforce. Fantastic. Stay with us as we return to Monza in just a moment for this opening program in the Eurosport Super Race Weekend 2001.